I'm not even going to introduce myself because I recently learned from a wise man that I should first tell you why you should care about what I'm going to tell you about. And you don't care about the number of cats that I have or where I live yet. First, I need to tell you why the webinar you are taking part in right now is relevant to you. And to start with that, the official title of the webinar is, I think, Alteryx versus Prep. And basically, we're going to be positioning Prep in general as a data preparation tool. But because we have a mixed audience here, we have a few beginners, we have a few intermediate people, and then even 2 advanced data prep users. I'm going to try and catch your attention with the importance of actually prepping data, which should not be underestimated. And to do so, we will actually start by taking this survey data that we have just gathered, that you have all input through Google Forms. And this is going to be our kickoff to demonstrate why it's important to know how to properly prepare your data for analysis. And I could go through the steps in desktop, but it would really cost us a bit too much time. And so I've already done all this, and I would have shown a video, but showing a video through a webinar is a really bad idea. So I just have screenshots of the steps here. But the data we've collected is effectively in a Google form right here. And so these are the responses that we're gathering for this very webinar. You see there are a few from timestamps before when we tested, but these are now excluded. And we're only looking at today's responses, so we're being completely fair. And our purpose is going to be to analyze this data in Tableau, right? And you could say, well, that's nice because it's a Google Sheet. I can connect this to Tableau Desktop, and that should be pretty straightforward, yes? Well, maybe. The thing is that survey data specifically is a really good example of data format that is not really that suitable for analysis with just any tool. What is special about this data? Well, I do recognize some dimensions, but I see that I have one column for each response from the form, right? So each question in the form, which I should have in this tab, yeah. Each response, and I don't want to show or spoil the results yet, but each response is being captured in a separate column. And well, that's pretty special because the more responses I have, the wider this sheet becomes. And that's fine, but how will that work in Tableau? And maybe you've already tried this. Survey data is notorious actually for this. But when you connect, it looks something like this. You have your form responses. The connection to Sheets is not a problem. But then what do you do with these columns? Well, you start analyzing, and maybe you'll drag on one of the many dimensions that you get on the left here. But already it looks weird because you have dimensions with names that are the questions. So okay, you can try and pivot these, which is a good start because that means that you will end up with just one column which contains the answers and one which contains the questions, which is better. But then as you proceed step by step, and excuse the quality of the screenshots, but the contents are really not that important. It's about, why it's not going to work well. But yeah, so we have questions and answers, and now I can list those, and I can even count the number of responses per. So in my demo data here, we had more advanced users. We had like a medium number of beginners, and then a lot of intermediate. So this is the data we input just to test all this. But you see, as you try to analyze it further, like this is a multiple choice question, the typical input, which you also responded to. Well, the input question is really hard to parse because there are multiple answers in the same cell. So if I look at this here, this cell here contains 2 values, operational database and then file-based. And so this is reflected very poorly in Tableau Desktop until I split it. But then I get like 10 columns here when I do split it, and then which ones do I need to use? I can try and bring those in, but there's many blanks, and then it's getting harder to count, and I'm really only counting combinations of answers. If I look at an answer separately, I really don't know what's going on. I can filter on a question, I can get somewhere. Like this is a decent visualization of an answer for one of the questions, the actions that are being taken, but the point is, we're going to get nowhere, and in the end, I'm just going to click the big X button on the top right and close Tableau, and probably not save my changes as being prompted. So that is why data prep is important, because if I was able to take my data and prepare it with another tool, then what I would have done would have been really, really simple. I would have done this. I would have done a first pivot, which we were able to do in Tableau Desktop. I would have done the split, which I was able to do in Tableau Desktop as well, but I was never able to do a second pivot. And that's, I would have done this to then split up the specific answers in here and then have one row per question answer participant, which is much cleaner data to work with. But I wasn't able to perform this last pivot step because of the nature of data prep in Tableau. So yeah, oh, sorry, I was just reading about Mark having to turn off his video, and he did, so thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so just look at the screen and look at me. Yeah, so the final pivot step we weren't able to perform because that's not the nature of how Tableau connects, or Tableau Desktop connects to data. Tableau Desktop can join and union and do a few things, but it's not a data prep tool in itself. That's what Tableau Prep Builder is for. And I have effectively built a prep flow that does this. It splits, it pivots, splits, and then pivots again. And then it does some cleaning, which is very different in essence and different in nature. This is a flow of data. It goes from a source to an output, and it takes the data throughout with those steps, and it performs actions on them. It manipulates them. It transforms the data. And that's something that, well, quite frankly, some data needs before it can be properly analyzed in Tableau Desktop. And so, yes, that's why prepping your data is important. And actually, as we move throughout the webinar, I will run this flow at this very point in time, right here. And so this is the same flow. It's connected to the sheet, and I'm going to run the output, and I'm going to override the extract that it creates, so that in the further steps of the webinar, we can take the same data and then see what the responses were from this very audience. And so I'll have to exit my quote unquote presentation mode in Tableau for a second. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh this data source, which is effectively, I extracted it again, which was probably unnecessary, but which is my very data here in Tableau from the prep flow. So I have this survey prep flow, which generates an extract, and I connect to it in Tableau Desktop. Now, so that I can use the much cleaner and well formatted data for my analysis. And yes, why don't we just move on and go to the first survey insights that I should probably refresh then. So let's see here, because I don't believe that there was just one answer. Maybe I refreshed the wrong data source. I have too many of them. Let's see. Oh no, I know what's happening. I will need to rerun the flow one more time. See, this is obviously proof that we are doing this in a live setting and that there is no fumbling with the data or anything. So I'll just have to reopen the flow here for a second. Why is this? Well, it's because I had Tableau Prep Builder open already before the webinar. And when it connects, it may cache the data to allow you to analyze faster without having to like query the source every time. But because of that, I wasn't able to rerun it without closing and reopening the flow. This is by design, obviously. This is just to make sure that this all performs well while you're analyzing the data. But in my case, with Prep Builder, I did want to restart the program so that I can now run the flow again. And then I'm unable to, well, now I'm unable to refresh it because desktop is connected to that extract. So just like Excel, there is a lock on that file, but that's fine. I can just close it for a second. I generate my data. And then what I'll do is I'll just reopen my webinar presentation here. And yeah, thank you for staying with us during these very real steps that we have to take. But as I refresh the extract now, yeah, much better. We get the real view of what our survey has been providing us with today. And effectively today, because we are filtering here on today's responses, so that's none of that dummy data that we had before, so that we can analyze the audience of the webinar. And that's interesting. I'm not sure if I expected this. I think maybe I did. So we have a relatively good spread of what type of data people input into their prep flows, if they already have those, or that they actually input for their analysis. And that's interesting. There's more data warehouse data than I expected, maybe. Although, then again, in enterprise environments, that would be perfectly expected. But here's one thing. So I'll just move this toggle and then highlight these two. This is kind of what I was expecting too. There is a very, very, very large number of people who are using file-based data sources and exports from systems. And these are highlighted together and could kind of be grouped, I think, because typically file-based means, yeah, it's an Excel export from a system that we tweaked a little bit, or it's an Access database that we use and we've, also tweaked to perform some basic ETL on our data, maybe from another system, and then we analyze it. And I'm highlighting those in red because I want to emphasize that ideally, you wouldn't have to do any of this. Ideally, you would be able to connect to your system without having to manually export the data or even schedule that export to a file. You should be able to connect either through its backend database, if it's allowed. Like think of Tableau Server, you can connect to the repository, which is the internal database of Tableau Server, and get your data from there. So that's one possibility. Or something not really quite described here, but maybe you can use an API, which is an interface that many systems provide so that you can pull data from there and pull it into your prep flow and analyze that. So yeah, I guess the gist here is I just want to highlight that there's probably improvements that can be made when it comes to using exports and file-based sources to your analysis and, well, in some cases to your prep flow as well. And these cases may be interesting as we talk to some of the people here and look into some cases. So that's good. That's the first insight from the survey, making this a little bit interactive, obviously. And so by now, I'm hoping that I have your attention and I will effectively introduce myself. And so my name is, I realize I could probably have put it on there, but my name is Timothy Vermeeren, super high-tech presentation tool here, Notepad. So this is the guy you see on the picture. I live in Belgium, and there is a reason that the national flag is shaped like this with the beer like shadow, if you will, because that is a hobby of most of the people here in the country. Who doesn't like to have a good cold beer or any other drink really with their friends? So that's one thing I do. I'm reflecting my musical taste through this instrument here, which I effectively own. In fact, I can prove that. This is the very guitar. It's the first time I do this, but this is the guitar you see there on the picture. So this indicates to you that I'm also a heavy metal music fan. But other than that, maybe, I like to run as well as a hobby. But other than that, my life pretty much revolves around data, which is indicated with the little rocket and Tableau symbol here. I've been using Tableau for almost, for over 6 years now. So it's been a while. Joined Biztory over 5 years ago. It was my anniversary a month ago, which was a lot of fun reminiscing about all the work we already did. Yeah, certifications, participated in Iron Viz even at some time, although that's not quite relevant to this very presentation. But the point is that having worked with Tableau for a long time, and also from the time that data prep was not a part of the product, I've seen a lot of different situations in a lot of different companies. Prep was released, I think, 2.5, 3 years ago. So there was a time where you would only have Tableau Desktop, and you could do that pivot, but there was even a time like before 2015 or 16 that pivot was not a functionality in Tableau, and there was an Excel add-in that you would use to pivot the data before you read it into Tableau. And so everything has evolved a lot, but now we have really, really good tools in 2020, including Tableau Prep Builder, and that helps us perform a much more powerful and automated analysis of our data as we go forward. So yeah, that's me. I'm just saying this because I will try and think of real life situations, then talk about those as we progress. But the main question we're asking now is, okay, we know we have to do data prep, and that's fine. But what tools should we use for this? And that's the question that I think most of you are asking themselves as they join this webinar. Because maybe it is Tableau Prep, but maybe it isn't. Maybe there's another tool that does something else that you want to use. Maybe there's another tool that you already use and you're wondering whether you should or should not replace it, partially or fully. And we're going to try and discover what the audience already does and what potentially options are for the webinar audience. There should probably be like a ton of disclaimers at this very point, but we're going to try and be neutral here. We're going to try and be objective. We're not going to be saying, yeah, this is a bad tool because this and that, or we're not going to be focusing on any tool except Tableau Prep, with the exception maybe of the second most popular tool of the audience in this webinar. And now this is where I have no clue whether or not our survey will support our claims or not. But I'll move to the next, and yeah, I think we're in luck. So I was going to highlight these two tools, Tableau Prep and Alteryx, because frankly, they are in companies that use Tableau Desktop at all. They are the most popular data prep tools that are available. They are the most powerful, the most versatile, and they integrate well with the Tableau environment. Both of them do. And therefore, yeah, this is the purpose. Like, we're going to try and do an objective, high-level comparison of these tools. Again, it's not about picking a winner or not saying, in general, this is the tool you need to use, because obviously the cases differ. Again, you need the right tool for the job that you're performing with this. And so that's what we're going to be doing in the next few minutes. We're going to determine what that tool is. So that being said, how can we do a high-level comparison and be objective about it? Well, I'm actually going to try and just highlight what Prep's strengths are and other tools' strengths, and in this case, Alteryx specifically. And I'm really happy if you disagree or if you have feedback or another opinion about something, that you post those in the chat and we can try and address those. I'll keep an eye on that. But really, I'm going to try to also, for those who are rather new, highlight the strengths of Prep, because after all, we are Biztory, we are a Tableau partner, and we really want to, also show you that Prep is our tool of choice for the right job. Like, take this with a grain of salt, because obviously, again, we're going to try and select the right tool for all of your jobs. But we work with Prep, and so we're going to focus on Prep mostly. Anyway, I know I'm talking a lot. That's not the subject matter, but now here we go, the comparison. So Tableau Prep and Alteryx, they are two different tools. And again, a lot of context is needed to interpret the terms that you see on the screen, and don't take these without the context. And like, there's a lot to be said about that. But the approach of the two tools is very different to start with. As Tableau Desktop has always been a very, very visual tool, so is Tableau Prep. In fact, it has always been built from a basis that is to be visual, and it continues to do so in every part of like actions you can take in it. And I maybe should just demonstrate some of these things instead of talking about them, because I can keep saying things, but without showing it doesn't make much sense. But we do have Tableau Prep here. And maybe the first kind of thing you can see, and I'll just open, okay, this is going to be lame, but I'm going to open a demo flow with the good old Superstore data, because why not? It has all of the capabilities in there, and it's just going to demonstrate well. But again, just to show you the visual approach of Tableau Prep. And again, not saying that this is not the case for Alteryx, but this is really what Prep focuses on. You see, as soon as you've connected and you're going into the first step of your data prep flow, the first thing you see is all kinds of visual representations of your data, right? It hits you immediately. You see, for each row here, I have 2,000 rows and I have 1,300 something unique values for sales. I see what their distribution is, and I see how many I have and what range they're in. I see the same for quantity. I even see those for discrete dimensions, such as state. I see that I have most of my rows here from the South data set coming from Florida. I can click and highlight, and this is going to show me immediately, what percentage is represented by the value of Florida. Every step I take is visually supported and is heavily relying on that. look at joins and unions. Like there's a union here between 4 different data sources. What happens? Well, Tableau Prep uses the 4 color codings of those data sources to indicate what kind of values are or are not present. For example, cool, I see that category here is represented in all 4 data sets because the 4 colors are present. File paths, on the other hand, which seems like a technical field, only present in the green field, which has, the previous step remove nulls, which I see is here. So that's my south data. So why is there a file path there? Well, I know that it's this green guy, so I can go back in the data and then back. And I see here, oh, this is connecting through multiple files. So it's already performing a union there, which will, by definition or like by functionality, include a file path field. And so because I'm combining multiple files here in the south region and not necessarily in the others, like this is a single table, that's the reason why I have this file path here, and that I don't, have them have that field in the others, etc. All visual cues to help me find what I need in here. Joins are the same, by the way, and I really want to show this one because it's a really cool example. Like as soon as you click a join step, it'll show you a visual representation of what data is included, excluded, or unmatched, missing, what your result is going to be. The little Venn diagram, obviously, that you need to have that, and Alteryx has it too, obviously, because that's the best representation of a join. But all of that is there, and it guides you everywhere. Again, not saying it's not the case for Alteryx, and maybe we can look into that a little bit as well. The focus is not on this specific tool, but just to show you, it also has a visual approach. Like, and I don't have a valid license, by the way, for Alteryx anymore, so I can't show you exactly because I was using a trial a few days ago. But if I were to run any of these steps, I would also have a visual representation of my data that shows the data like distribution and things. But here, this is part of a specific step. The choice was made to have a browse action or browse module or item or tool, call it what you want. And that will be, what you use to analyze your data visually and its distribution. Other steps are sometimes visual too, but it's not as much, the emphasis as it is for Tableau Prep here. So that would be the first differences in the approach. And maybe I should say, like, visual and technical are not antonyms of each other. They're not the opposite. I think that the approach from Alteryx is more technical because they have more advanced uses in all kinds of built-in tools. For example, something that you can't do natively in Prep, but you can do in Alteryx, is use a tile tool, which will help you redistribute your data based on different criteria, but you cannot do that in Prep. Now, why do you want to do this? And I'm no expert on this matter, but as far as I understand, the idea is to group based on measures, for example, and then have representative samples of your data. That's one use of tiling here. And so knowing how to use that is relatively technical because you need to configure this tool. And that's something that I think that, the developers for Prep purposefully leave out. Like they make it more visual, and they will have you select your data somewhere. Like here, I could select and keep data. If I want to filter my ship mode, I'll do that from the data, but I won't be doing that with a tool. So you see, the whole approach is a bit different here, is what I guess I've been repeating for a while now. So that's one main difference. And again, not saying one's better than the other, it's just different. And Prep really aims to be intuitive, whereas Alteryx has more specialized capabilities that may lack in Prep. So I don't have quite the demonstration for this, but when I say intuitive, it builds on that visual aspect. As I was saying, what if I want to filter data in Prep? I'm just going to go to that data, like here. I see ship mode first class. I want to keep just this. I'll right click it and keep only, which is a bit different from the idea in other tools, where you would probably insert a filter step in your flow and then define that filter, and although that will also be simple, probably, like you can just select values from a list, it's not quite the same as just seeing your data and saying, this is what I want to do with it. Here, I just click the data and interact with it, right? So the most intuitive experience that they could probably figure has been brought to the user here in prep. So there's that. And so when I say that the usage for Alteryx is more specialized, I think that what I was trying to convey here is that a specialist in some fields may be drawn to Alteryx more in the first place. And I have a good example open here. Like, these are all the collections of tools that Alteryx offers, and they are very, very broad and extremely like powerful. There's so many things you can do natively, including these spatial items here, these spatial functionalities. You can take spatial data or even just latitudes and longitudes or polygons and build the spatial data you need, and then do powerful things with them, like find nearest, calculate distances, create heat maps, and make grid. All of that is really specialized use. Like, you know, transportation will, or people working in transportation will really use these functionalities. And not saying that they're not possible in prep, but, you know, if this is what you do all day, then you're probably better off using Alteryx because that's what you're going to be doing all the time. Whereas prep, you can do like a large number of actions very intuitively, and it's going to be very easy to use for a larger number of the population. So different approach there as well. And then the integration, obviously. So yeah, well, Tableau Prep is a Tableau tool, and without any surprise, integrates very well in the Tableau ecosystem. Like, you know, what else would you expect? If they had developed it and it wouldn't integrate well, then I think there would be some questions that have to be asked and some other actions to be taken. But it is the case. Like, we'll demo that later on based on the amount of time we have left. But, you know, if you use Tableau Prep with Tableau Server, there's a lot of collaboration options and a lot of like additional things you can do that are really, really powerful. So obviously, if you already use Tableau desktop and server, Tableau Prep like naturally fills in with that. Whereas Alteryx, you know, Alteryx has their own like ecosystem as well, but it is designed to fit in the broader picture. Like, if you use all kinds of other systems and you have a self-service environment, then Alteryx is going to fit right in there. It's going to be possible for you to bring that in as a tool, and it's going to be like agnostic from whatever the input and output is. You can go to Tableau with Alteryx, but you don't have to. And that's not meaning that you cannot go to anything else with Tableau Prep, because you can too. But Alteryx really focuses on that abstraction, and it's going to do your self-service data prep and going to make that really easy, and it's going to go anywhere, including Tableau. But then Tableau, you know, Prep integrates 100% with what that is, the Tableau ecosystem. And again, I want to make clear, this is not this tool is better or you cannot do this with this tool, because that would be like, if you tell me you cannot do this with Tableau Prep, or tell anyone at Biztory for that matter, I will try and prove you wrong and, well, hopefully succeed. But there's like these typical things that are being said because Tableau Prep is a relatively young product. And what I think for the last year and a half we've been hearing is, how come Tableau Prep doesn't write back to other databases? Well, that is because Tableau Prep has been developed very iteratively, and functionalities are being added all the time. And eventually it will, like really soon. This has been announced at the last Tableau conference, and native write back functionality will be available. But that doesn't mean that it's not possible yet. Like, we've already found 3 different ways of doing that for clients and for ourselves. But here's one interesting example I had fun figuring out, which is sending data from Tableau Prep to BigQuery, Google BigQuery, which is our backend for reporting, and which is perfectly possible. So we take our Slack data from an API, which technically you cannot connect to, except that you can, and we send that to BigQuery. And it's mostly using the capabilities of integrating Tableau Prep with Python, which basically you know, removes any boundary that you may have. Because if you know how to do it in Python or R for that matter, by the way, I'm used to doing this with Python, but it could be done in R and soon any other analytics language. You know, you take away that boundary, because then you can take your data outside of prep, manipulate it, or send it wherever or however you want. So like that restriction kind of moves out. And like geographic APIs, like a client for us, or I should say of ours, was interested in calculating drive time, which again, Alteryx does natively. Doesn't mean that prep doesn't do it, it's very easy to have a step in here, like this is not shown on the screen, but you could have a step that connects to a map box or Bing Maps or Google Maps API and sends the information like, I want to go from that point to that point. And these APIs return results that are the drive time that you need and the itinerary you need to follow, etc. So all of those things exist and can be addressed from Prep 2. The thing is just like, how adventurous are you if you want to do these specific things, right? So you can do anything with either of the tools. It's just going to depend on what is the best approach for you. And that's the next thing we're going to try and find out. We haven't looked at the survey data in a while. We've just been comparing at a high level, and I hope that this gives you a good picture of what the different approaches for the tools. But what do the people in our webinar effectively do with their tools? Well, next slide, let's see. Oh yeah, you'll remember, maybe you'll remember this question from the survey. So we were asking what actions you frequently take on data you're prepping, right? You do cleaning, parsing, pivoting, predictive capabilities, etc. And we've taken all of these answers from the form, and I have grouped them in a specific way. And I see that I've done a really bad job at it because apparently I have predictive capabilities and prescriptive twice here, and they're being grouped once in data science and one on their own, but that shouldn't be a problem because then I can just edit that data, right? So some more live tweaking of what we do. Data prep usage types, use predictive, blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna put that here, and there we go. Okay, again, another proof that this is not all prepped and tweaked and a scam. But yeah, so, sorry, my point was, I've taken all of the actions from the form and I've categorized those. We should actually start with data wrangling because that's like your typical use. Data wrangling is the cleaning. It's trimming your fields. It's making sure that all the values match, like, oh, I have Arizona and I have AZ. Well, that's actually one value. I want to combine that. So all of the cleaning, joining and enriching, so joining in other systems and files, pivoting and transposing like we did for our survey, pre-calculating stuff, often for performance purposes, and then unioning, appending, you know, all the wrangling. That's really like, it's a relatively new term, but that really encompasses all of those actions really well. So those have been grouped. There is some parsing and advanced prep, like sometimes for some analyses, you need to generate additional data. I'm not talking about forecasts specifically, maybe that should have been specified, but sometimes you generate data because there's missing data, so you want to have that in there as well. So you can generate that through some means, and you can do some parsing of non-relational data formats like XML and JSON. And the reason I'm putting that here specifically and not in data wrangling is because this is admittedly slightly more difficult in Tableau Prep. Again, this is coming, product is being developed like crazy fast, and they're adding functionalities as we speak. That sounds very newsy and very much like an advertisement. But yeah, so they're building this, but currently parsing JSON in prep would, you know, you would be limited to just parsing one file and you couldn't connect to others easily. So this is things that are being still improved. And that being said, I've put that in a separate category because these are things that are kind of advanced and that, you know, I think belong together. Then there's data science-like things, and I'll admit I have no data science background or experience at all. Like I'm a relatively visual analyst, and I know Tableau desktop and stuff pretty well. I've actually been doing Tableau server work more often, but I don't really know my statistics or data science. So I've grouped these here, hoping not to miss too many capabilities, but everything that's predictive, like forecasting or prescriptive even, are things that I find fancy and scary. And I've just put under data science, and I'm sure there's people on the calls here who know better. But yeah, we've put that there, and then there's specialized as well. And I could only find one real example of this, and I'm sure there's more, but I just haven't stumbled upon any in the last 2-3 years. But like spatial transformations of data and stuff, that's like, again, people from transportation sectors, that's very specific uses. Now, why did I group this? Well, that's to look at, you know, depending on your usage, what will be the right tool. So this has been, you know, what we've been building towards all the time. And now I really hope the survey, again, is going to work for me. But let's find out. These 4 groups have been shown here. And depending on your use, a certain tool will probably fit your needs. And like, again, I will walk through some steps here, but the first type of data manipulation, data prep, is data wrangling. And it's quite clear that all of that can easily be done in Tableau Prep. All of the transformation and everything, all of the joining, all of the unioning, all of the cleaning, all of that is really easy to do there. So you don't need anything else if you're mostly going to do that type of work. So in that case, like if you already have Tableau and you could use Tableau Prep, there's no reason to look at a more specialized tool, I would think. Again, not generalizing, maybe there's other use cases next to these, but in this case, we can establish that 76% of the cases in our survey can be fully fulfilled with data wrangling, or data wrangling and thus with Prep. Now, there's a few others like data science and advanced parsing. Again, Prep cannot not do it. It can do it, but it'll take you'll have to be a little more adventurous. Like maybe you'll have to use a Python script that or that you integrate in the flow, and that can be fine. Like more people have experience with Python or R than they do with Prep, so maybe they can take those capabilities and then combine that and still have valuable like tool set with those two, and then they're fulfilling almost like 95-96% of all the needs here. And then admittedly, like specialized, this is probably underrepresented in the survey because there was only geospatial analysis, and there's probably slightly more, but other tools will do very, very, very specialized things better than Tableau Prep does. So you can admit that, but the point here is to say that we cover quite a bit of everything that you have to do with this specific tool. And again, if you already have it with Tableau, why not just use that as well? And then maybe use another tool adjacently or like in a complementary way to do all of that. There's a few questions in the Q&A, but I think these are more relevant to keep for the end when we have some dedicated time for that. But I'll try to keep an eye out. If there's specific questions to the matter, then don't hesitate to ask them here. But then final part of the survey, the outputs, is also important. And like, yeah, well, obviously this is a webinar hosted by Biztory, and most people are going to be working with Tableau after they've prepped their data. So again, a good reason to stay in that ecosystem, which just works well, and use that like one tool, Tableau, Prep, Desktop, and Server, to get all of that done, because it's just going to integrate really well. If your output is a database of another type, then you can consider being creative to output that, or wait for a few months and then use the native functionality. Flat files or Excel, no problem. That's already part of the output. But this, again, is one of the questions that will drive that question, or that your response to this question, like what's the tool that's right for my usage, the right tool for the job. And so, well, this is just a small sample of the survey, but I seem to find that the conclusion is that very often your needs would be fulfilled with Prep. Now, again, we can only generalize here. We have a very broad, well, actually, no, sorry, we have a very specific audience, and this was a very specific survey, but you should ask yourself this question. And here's an idea of how you can find out what's right for your case. And this is inspired, it's fictional, it's fully fictional data, but it's inspired by some usage reviews that companies have been doing. And in this case, we're gonna work for some company, and what they've done is they've sent out a similar survey actually as we just have used in the webinar, and they've sent that out to their users. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to review the usage of their tools and optimize that, of their prep tools, I should say, and optimize that, because maybe they had 3 or 4 separate tools being used alongside with Prep, and they were like, well, why are we paying for the licenses for these or using others? It's not even just about the money, but what if you have another open source tool that's more specified, more specialized, but you could fulfill its needs with Prep? Like, what do you do with that? And the first step is to learn, obviously. And they did this usage review with a survey, and they like, this was interesting. They profiled their users. They found that, of users using a paying tool, there were a whole bunch of latent users. Like they had licenses for a certain tool, but they weren't even using it. Well, that's a license that you can take back and like give to people who actually use it. Even if it's not prep, like there's probably someone else who can do something more useful than waiting and using it every 3 months. So that's one type of profile they discovered. They were specialized users, obviously, and they would, establish that these are the types of people that need a very specific tool for their job. And maybe the same goes for advanced analytics users, like I'm doing this crazy predictive or prescriptive model, and I need to use this specific tool for that. Well, perfect, because then you're going to want to use that specialized tool as well. There was an interesting other type of profile that we found in some of these surveys, which was the app builder. Because what these people did is, and this is, I'll admit, this is Alteryx specific, but a really great capability of Alteryx server is to create a prep, like a data prep flow in Alteryx, put it on the server and publish that as an app. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't know the technicalities quite well. But what's really cool is you can then have that app be available for others as well. Again, this is something that you could do with prep by building a flow the right way, but this is just like native functionality on server. So these guys were very happy with that functionality and using that. And so these are all specific user profiles, but we also found that out of all of those, 222, which is the main part of the population, were really just doing your typical, data prep, your data wrangling that we saw in our usage types here, or I should say in this chart, which is kind of like the same representation of the population. And again, these are dummy numbers, but these are like averages that we find throughout different surveys. But this is really interesting and something you could consider doing as well, like to find out, first of all, what kind of users do you have and who does deserve, if you will, or need access to a special tool. This is just a list representation with some fake names of the same thing. Like, you could generate a list and then communicate based on that, filter on the data prep users, and then send them a subsequent survey, maybe saying, hey, here's an ID. How about you use this visual and intuitive tool, Tableau Prep, and not this specific open source tool that we don't want to maintain, or any tool for that matter. And then what you can also do is almost all of the tools that you work with will allow you to analyze the metadata on their usage. So you can see what type of work people are doing with these tools based on the metadata that you collect. You can pull that from internal databases, like even Tableau Server keeps data on what is being run and what type of tools are being used and how reports are. And all of that can be extracted and analyzed to find out, well, clearly, preparation steps and input and output steps and join steps and transform steps and meta steps like renaming are the most common uses for our tools. So, that's all kind of stuff that Tableau Prep does. So why shouldn't we just be using that for these purposes? And again, this is the purpose of this very survey example, is to inspire you to do a similar analysis, hopefully, like to learn about the usage of the tool so that you can optimize how they're being used. You're not going to replace all of your tools with Tableau Prep, probably, but you can rethink what's being used for what and do that in an optimal way. So take this as an example of what you could also analyze. And then finally, we wanted to, I promised that we would focus a little bit on why Tableau Prep works so well in the Tableau ecosystem, which kind of speaks for itself, but you don't have to take my word for it. I was going to demo that as well. And I'll just do that for 5 minutes. And then after that, we can have a quick run through the questions that were asked. But here are a few example flows that I could have used for that. And I can open these on the server. As I click it, they'll open here. But just a quick run through of what Tableau Prep Builder, can do once you've published the flow to Tableau Server, the integration really between those products. Well, first of all, you see a good graphical representation here, which very soon will be interactive. But you also see a run history as you've scheduled that flow. You see what the output was, a steady number of rows that sometimes changes here, but I get an overview of how that flow has been doing over time. I see what it connects to, and I can trigger it from here. Like, this is all relatively basic, but it seems simple, but really this is just, you already had extract refreshes running on Tableau Server. This is where your automation for Tableau data already took place. So now this is also a part of it. It's not in a separate system. You will know if your data fails at this point, you know, what the impact is on the rest of the stuff on your Tableau server as well, because it's integrated. And actually, how about using this little flow to show you that? So part of how prep integrates on server is that you can see the lineage of your data. And the lineage is really interesting because this shows me that this prep flow connects to two specific tables in BigQuery. And this is the Slack data for Biztory that we're writing to BigQuery. And that's interesting because then maybe I can look at these messages here. And so that goes to the Biztory data system. And oh, apparently there's a whole lot of tables in here that are being used by all kinds of workbooks and reports. So if I look here, I have the Slack usage databases. We have our knowledge base based on Slack, and we have all kinds of stuff coming out of Slack from these tables, from this database. That would be used here. So the lineage functionality also integrates really well. So you can manage your flows and see how they impact your other data and your workflows, all from a central place, which is Tableau Server, which is where you already manage all the rest of your stuff. And that's just one thing. But then this here, I haven't done before, but how about we just try and do this in 2 minutes together? What you can do in Tableau Prep, and that's very new, that's the reason I haven't done it before, is you can take specific steps of a flow and you can share those through Tableau Server with others so that they can reuse steps that you've already gone through. So the Superstore example is probably pretty good here, but what about these here? Like I have all of these steps, and apparently I can save these steps as a flow and publish them to server. Like I'm saying apparently like I'm surprised, but I know that I can. I just haven't walked through everything yet. But I'll just put that, oh, I don't want to mess up everything we have on our server. How about ad hoc? That's what this is. Superstore save step. Maybe I want to save my colleagues time because I'm already unioning and combining our different data sources for my super important Superstore analysis. So this is combined data, and I want others to be able to reuse this. Well, I publish these specific steps to Tableau Server. So file data is packaged, that's fine. This is based on Excel, so it's a stupid example, but these could be databases, obviously. And then this flow appears here. So, ooh, Superstore save steps, combined data. And then, so that was the specific portion I selected. And maybe I'm the next analyst, and I'm opening Tableau Prep on my other computer because I'm another person. And I'm wondering, how would I go and combine all of our Superstore data because it's in different databases and I don't want to do that. Well, interestingly, I think I can, well, this is open a flow locally. But if I just start a new flow, and this is kind of silly because you have to select something. So here's some COVID data that's not quite relevant. I'm sure there's another way of doing this. But I can now go, once I have this workspace, and insert a flow, go to Tableau Server and see, oh, interesting. Haha, well, I fooled you. I already tested it a few days ago. But yeah, so I can combine the steps and I can just open these and there you go. So I have these steps here that are, managed from server and taken from there. Someone is asking, the flow publishing you are showing is part of the Tableau Server data management add-on. Is that correct? Yes. So the data management add-on is what gives you all the capabilities around managing and automating flow runs on the server and the data lineage capabilities here, which, well, I don't have yet because this part of the flow has not been used yet. But it's true, that's part of a specific package called the metadata or the server metadata add-on. So yeah, it's a specific set of functionalities, typically, for managing metadata. Anyway, so I guess I have a script somewhere that I can use to see what I wanted to show you, and that's right here. And so this was just demonstrating these things. But I think, yeah, we have 5 minutes left. I'm going to skip to the conclusion, and then we can open up for some more questions. But I want to summarize because I realize I'm very chaotic when I talk about all of this. But let's take a step back and see what we have looked at today. So we've established that you can have all kinds of tools that do your data prep, but you would want to use the right tool for the right job. You don't always have to use the most powerful tool for your data wrangling because that just doesn't make sense, especially if it goes back into Tableau, which is the second bullet point here. I looked up a few expressions that I was going to use to to like underline this first statement. So use the right tool for the right job. And I found don't bring a gun to a knife fight because that's overkill. And I even found one that says you don't have to kill a mosquito with a bazooka. And that's a very American thing to say, but that's true. Like, you know, if you just need some data to be transformed, combined, and then, you know, do your data wrangling steps, and it goes from a database to Tableau, then, you know, you're going to be perfectly fine with prep. And if you want to do some more advanced things, you can do those, but you will just want to explore that a little bit. So yeah, that was one conclusion from our survey as well. And then optimizing your tool selection and usage is an exercise that you may be interested in. So this is what some companies we've worked with have done already and have had interesting learnings from, like, oh, apparently we don't need to always use the same tool, and we can reallocate licenses very optimally, and then have these people use prep was sometimes the conclusion. And let's just be open about it. Maybe that's not going to be the case, but you won't know until you have, you know, done the whole exercise and maybe surveyed your users to find out. And then, well, just obviously, so this is a Biztory webinar presentation. So I need to say, if you have questions about any of this, or if you want to run that survey or analysis in your company and you don't know how to, obviously we are very, very happy to help you with that analysis or with any other data problem that you have. So yeah, obviously there is kind of a salesy approach to this as well. And this has now been mentioned officially, so I've done my job. That being said, we have a few minutes left for Q&A because technically we're scheduled to stop in 3 minutes. There were a few questions out there already, and I'll just answer those, but feel free to post in the chat or ideally in the Q&A, actually, if you have some more. But someone is asking if you could connect to SAP BW, SAP BW, or HANA from Prep. That's a good question. I don't know by heart, but let's find out here. Yeah, it looks like you can connect to SAP HANA or SAP HANA. I don't know about BW. I seem to recall for Tableau Desktop, they have a specific connector for this that's not enabled in the product as such. You need to reach out to Tableau to find out about that. The reason is that it is for really specialized use, and typically they like to guide you if you're going to do that. So I think you just need a special, like, it's going to be a different license if you want to do that, but they can enable that functionality for you typically. That's the case for Tableau Desktop. I believe it may be the same for Prep, but I may be mistaken. If you do have that specific question and you want to learn about that more, feel free to reach out to us and we can find out about the specificities. But for now, that's my my understanding of how it has been in the past. Someone's also asking how well Tableau Prep manages large input data sets, like 100+ megabyte Excel files, for example, which is a good question. Before anything, I'm going to go back to my first insight survey here and repeat what I said. Yeah, if you're going to use file-based data sources, ask yourself why. Maybe you have a good reason. Maybe there's a reason I don't know of, but you're probably better off if you're going to use a tool like Prep, connecting to a step closer to the source. Like, is there an API for your tool that you can connect to? Is there an underlying database that you can connect to? In which case you can skip the export or file-based step, and that's going to be much, much easier. Now, I realize I haven't seen every situation, obviously, and maybe there's cases where this is a necessity, which is perfectly fine. And in that case, in my experience, Tableau Prep manages large files quite well. In general, it manages large data amounts quite well too. I think I've experimented with some large data volumes. That was in BigQuery. It wasn't file-based, but that was 150 million rows, which isn't huge, but it's representative, I hope to say. And that was working quite well. Tableau Prep is obviously not going to load all of that data, but there's a few tweaks that it does, like it samples your data with some smart algorithms to get a representative sample. You can force it to use all the data as you work through here, or you can just use a fixed number of rows. And that's how you're going to build your flow. So it handles that quite well. Obviously, once you run it for real, it's going to take all the data. You don't want to just process your sample, but when you launch it, that is when it's going to be through all that. So I think that it should be able to handle large Excel files as well, based on my experience with other larger, though non-file-based data sets. Good. Does Tableau Prep supports macros? So that's, yeah, a macro is an Alteryx specific functionality that's basically a few bundled steps that you can reuse as one step in a flow. So currently it doesn't. We have just demonstrated an alternative though, which is to save steps on server. And that works pretty well. The thing is that you see when I opened that collection of steps, when I inserted the flow specifically, they were expanded again. And the advantage of a macro is that, you know, all of that is condensed into one tool. It's abstract and you don't have to care about what goes um, on in the tool. You just care about what goes in and comes back out. Now, this is also functionality that's being worked on. So currently, insert flow is going to be like, bam, it's going to put all those steps on your screen. But in the future, you're going to be able to make that abstraction as well and have a similar concept as you would in Alteryx. I realize that there may be some specific functionalities to macros that are not addressed here, but it's been too long since I've used those. So if there's specifics you want to know about, like could we do this, again, feel free to reach out and we can help you with those specific questions. I'm going to keep going for another few minutes. We're 2 minutes past the hours in case you had another meeting to attend, but I'm happy to stay on a few more minutes for remaining questions. One person was also asking if you can write custom SQL queries with dynamic parameters. And I seem to interpret that as a more desktop related question because a parameter is inherently a desktop concept. It's not quite a concept you use in prep. For those who don't know, a parameter is a way of adding interactivity to a Tableau dashboard or workbook. And I have parameters here that are just like sliders that have a value of 1 and 2, and they change the sheet a little bit. But these could be input values, such as a specific dimension member. It could be a target that you dynamically adjust as you interact with the dashboards, right? So for that reason, the concept is proper to desktop and is only relevant in the moment when your user is going to interact with Tableau Desktop. That means that I don't really see how this pertains to prep. Like you can't tell yet what that parameter's value is going to be if you're in the flow here, because you're only prepping your data for your next step, which is going to be the analysis in Tableau Desktop. So I don't think that this applies. Now I can speak to a custom SQL a little bit. This is Google Drive. I don't have a connection to something else, but I guess I could use BigQuery quickly. So I'm authenticating on the other screen. There we go. And I don't know if BigQuery even supports it. I think most relational databases do. But if we're looking at our Slack data here, I'm pretty sure that it should be possible for me to use custom SQL, right? So I can use a SQL query here. It's not going to be dynamically based on parameters because again, that concept doesn't really apply at the stage of data prep, but it can be used for other means that you would have used custom SQL in the past, such as reusing a certain view or anything, you know, whatever reason you may have had to use custom SQL. And yes, so as far as I can tell, that's the last question we still had in Q&A for now. I'm just quickly scanning the chat, but it looks like we have addressed everything there. All that's left for me to do is to thank everyone for their active participation in this case, because it was really fun working with the survey data and having that, you know, for this live analysis. I'm kind of happy with how that turned out because we really didn't know, but turns out we know our audience a little bit. Take these learnings with you. Think about them. Think about using the right tool for the job. Think about how you can profile your users in your community, in your company, and see what that means for you. And if there's anything that we can help you with, don't hesitate to reach out. This webinar has been recorded and will be shared, and all of the attendees will receive the link for it so that later on you can review it or show it to some colleagues who might be interested. So one final time, thank you. And it is a beautiful day here in central Belgium. So I think that now I'm going to go outside and enjoy that. And maybe you should do the same. Think about it. All right. Thank you and goodbye.